Okay, this week I'm going to actually touch upon again on nutrition to kind of reiterate stuff that you can actually make progress with outside of AA. So now with nutrition, well, you got to look at it like in the sense there are a lot of different approaches. Now there two extremes, like completely animal based with carnivore and completely plant based with vegan, and there are a ton of other ones in between: vegetarian, pescatarian. There's like a paleo. There's keto. Of course, then you also get into the concept of like intermittent fasting, where like you only eat like within like a certain time frame, like 8 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours. Do one meal a day. So like the big thing is with so much out there that there could be there's all this there's just too much and everything. I don't know what to fucking do. Like I just screw it and everything. What you need to do is you need to like in essence look at like, okay, do all these approaches work? Yes. Okay, so now what you need to do is like ultimately find the approach that works for you. So it's like a lot of time and effort on your end. You got to look at yourself as like a you're the scientist. You are your own scientist. You are your own test subject, and you kind of have to figure out like, okay, what foods do I respond best to? So now, like for instance, you might find that you eat Brussels sprouts and you just feel like an absolute like dog shit and everything, but then you eat asparagus and you're like, hey, yeah, this actually works and everything. So you're going to with that being like an example, you might end up in essence prioritizing asparagus because they're like, hey, yeah, I actually feel pretty good when I eat asparagus, and I like eating that pretty much all the time. But when it comes to Brussels sprouts, like, oh, screw that. As the star of the show shows up and everything. Yes, we're talking about food. What? You got food? Yes. Oh, no, you got to go off and. There we go. The star of the show showed up to help us talk about nutrition. And the same thing, with vegetables, the same thing that goes with fruits. Like, you might think, you couldn't care less about mangoes or, oranges or whatever, but you love apples and blueberries. There you go. So, a big thing, like, the first and foremost is, look at, the fruits and veggies that you could eat on like a daily basis, and like the same thing like with the complex carbohydrates, like with the oatmeal, cereal. Like look at like things like Cheerios. Now you may be lactose intolerant, so instead of like putting milk in, what you could do is maybe do like a animal based protein powder and mix it with water and then put it in your cereal. You could do something like that. I mean, for most of us that kind of seems kind of odd because most people aren't lactose intolerant, so we tend to put milk in our cereal. So I tend to, like, when it comes to cereals, tend to gravitate more towards things like Cheerios because that's a lot better choice than something like your sugary types like Fruity Pebbles and Cinnamon Toast Crunch and stuff. So trick is to also increase your protein intake. Like what I've done is take like a scoop of like your protein powder and put it in. Again, I use whey protein because I'm not lactose intolerant. So you might have to like I said, if you are, you might have to substitute a plant-based protein powder. But I'll take a scoop of whey protein, put that in my milk, and then put it in. Get an extra 30 grams of protein. So that there's another one trick. And then when it comes to protein sources, like I said with like whey protein, you want to find protein sources that like you like to eat and everything. So you might sit there and absolutely hate eating fish and everything, but you do like eating beef and everything. There you go. And of course, we got to touch upon like financial constraints too. So you might be like, well, I don't necessarily have enough money to buy uh, like the good old ribeye steaks at 10, 12, $14 a pound or whatever. But I can get ground beef at $2 or $3 a pound. So is ribeye steaks better than ground beef? Yeah, but also you also, like I said, you gotta have to look at your financial constraints too and everything. So finding fruit and veggies that you like to eat, as our buddy is looking for attention. Yes, I know you're looking for attention. So looking for fruit and veggies that you like to eat, looking for protein sources that you like to eat, and you also want to look for healthy fats that you can eat on a regular basis. An example I usually like to use is the avocado. They got a bunch of healthy fats in there. The trick is though, like what you want to do, make sure is that you're not going overboard with any of them. This is where like something like the MyFitnessPal comes into play. So you can sit there. I had success in getting my nutrition in check using that because like you can sit there on this phone and be like, oh hey, look, here's how much I'm intaking of like my fats, my protein, my carbs, and then you can sit there and it gives you a good idea on like a good ballpark idea and like okay, let me adjust and like and see how where I can like make it fine tune my nutrition and everything. So you might feel that like more towards like a keto type approach where you're increasing your fat intake and lowering your carb intake. You might find that that works best for you and everything. So it gets back to me mentioning you have to be your own scientist, you have to be your own test subject, and like the whole scientific approach and everything. Like you put out a hypothesis, hey look, I think that the paleo approach is going to work for me. So then you sit there, and of course you're going to have to do more of like what is known as a longitudinal study. So meaning you can't just do like something like over a course of a week or something like, oh hey, here we go, this works. Do it over the course of maybe like 2 or 3 months and see how it works, and then like get you collect your data that way over 2 or 3 months, and then like okay, well here's like my conclusion, here's what I see and everything. Let me go and do the same thing like with vegan, carnivore, pescatarian, vegetarian, like whatever, like and then of course over the next couple years you'll like get all this data. I'm like, okay, here's like the this approach, like the keto works pretty good, a lot better than versus vegan. Okay, well then you do the compare and contrast with like all these like mini studies you did with yourself and everything to see which approach actually worked best for you. So then like you might be like, oh well, that's just going to take too fucking long and everything. It's like it's going to take me 1.5 2 years to get my nutrition in check, to get take all these different approaches and see what works best for me. The 1.5 and 2 years are going to pass anyway, so you might as well like sit there and work on towards finding which approach works best for you, because there is no magical like one size fits all. Like everyone needs to go carnivore. Oh no, we need to save the planet, we need to go vegan, or like we need to like, oh hey look, it's all about keto or whatever. It's about you making the decisions and using, like I said, the scientific method. Okay, here's a hypothesis. I think keto is going to work great for me. Then you start setting yourself up with collecting the data, using something like MyFitnessPal to track the stuff, so you can gather the data and everything. And then after, like I said, like 2 maybe 3 months, you can come to the conclusion. Okay, here's kind of like the results. Let me go to the drawing board, and then like back to the drawing board. Let me do that with carnivore. Let me do that with vegan. Let me do that with pescatarian. And then, like I said, over the course of like maybe like 1.5 2 years, along like and this, on top of doing this, along with going to like the gym, getting your physical health in order, and like all the other stuff that I talk about, like with the smart recovery, getting your mental health in order, you can then sit there and be like, okay, here's like in a sense like a 2-year study I just did with all these different approaches. Here's like my final conclusion. Now, like the overarching top of the pile of studies is what's known as a meta-analysis, where they take a bunch of studies with this meta-analysis. They'll take like 20 30 studies, look at like all 20 30 studies, and be like, okay, based on all this information that was gathered on these separate studies, here's what we find, like the common threads of what's good, what's bad, what's like kind of indifferent. So that's kind of like what you can do after doing like all these like a 2 to 3 like 3 month like mini studies. You take a step back and do your own meta-analysis, like based on all these approaches that I've done the last 2 years of like the like, 2 extremes of carnivore and vegan and everything in between. Here's the approach that I found best works for me. Now, it may not necessarily be exactly like a paleo diet, like okay, geared towards maybe a paleo type of approach works for me, where I also kind of branch out and like maybe you use aspects of other approaches as well. So the underlying theme would be what protein sources work for me, what carb sources work for me, and what fat sources work for me when it comes to whole nutrition food. So the idea of like whole nutritious food is like usually like your single ingredient foods. Like when you pick up an apple, there's one ingredient in an apple. It's an apple. The same thing like an orange. The same thing like with beef, fish, uh, asparagus, or like Brussels sprouts, like the example I've used before. Pretty much like any veggie and like fruits and like any like protein source like beef, fish, pork, like chicken, and fat sources like healthy fat sources like the avocado example that I used. Okay, so these are the types of like healthy fats, healthy proteins sources, healthy carbs that work best for me. And like you might end up kind of have like a smorgasbord of like an approach from all different aspects and everything. So like you might like find like a aspects of the vegetarian diet work great for you. Like hey, look, these are the stuff that from here that works great for me. And then like from the carnivore approach, like these are the types of the foods that work great for me in this and everything. So it's going to take a lot longer to get things in order instead of just saying, oh, hey, look, here's keto. I'm going to stick with that. Boom, end of story. And then just stick with it for like the next 2 years. And then you could in essence, be screwing yourself up long term. So that, by doing this way, you can step back and actually find out what actually works for you and what can stick for you. Because like the good old phrase is like a lot of times you go on a diet, and a lot of times it's because you're going on a diet to get off that diet, and you necessarily have to look at that like as like a short term fix or whatever. You want to look at it as like, hey, look, I'm here to get my nutrition in check, because the whole idea of nutrition is getting nutrients, your like vitamins and your minerals for your micronutrients, and your macronutrients, like your protein, carbs, and fat sources. That's the whole concept of nutrition, is to get those things that our body needs to, in essence, function and everything. So that's kind of like the approach that you want to take to make sure you get your nutrition in check and everything. And now, yes, it's going to take longer. Like I said, I used a 1.5, 2 year example to doing all these like studies and stuff. But the payoff is going to be that much better, because then you're going to be able to, after 2 years or so of doing all these studies and kind of like getting all this information, finding what approach it works for you, next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or however old you are and however long left you have to live, it's going to pay dividends that much bigger, because you're going to have like an approach that you can stick with over the course of your life, instead of going on a diet like, hey, look, my goal is to get on this diet to lose weight, and I know I'm going to get off this diet after 3 or 4 months. So instead of looking at it like a short term, like, oh yes, I'm going on a diet, look at it long term with nutrition, and find something that you can do over the course of your entire life.